Thank you. Very pleased to be chairing this panel and to be joined by Tatiana and by Jana, who've both already been introduced to you at dinner, so I won't spend any more of our time on that. Our title is Choosing a Mother Tongue. And I'm always amazed at the Alpine Fellowship how many of the other conversations already anticipate what gets said later. And we've seen this topic approached already in what Precious said yesterday, in another way, in what Hanako was saying, and a point that I really hadn't considered, that the language in which you feel to be your mother tongue might not necessarily be the language in which you're most fluent. Really interesting points here. But as we've seen already, and as I think we'll see in this conversation, this is a question with many different dimensions. There are issues of phenomenology about feeling at home, feeling comfortable in a particular language, feeling authentically yourself. There are political dimensions, as will come out in the discussion with Tatiana. There's also this idea of choice that's thematized in our title. So not just having a mother tongue, but actively choosing it, embracing that as an element of your identity, and also the idea of incorporating things into it. And I think that this will come out in Jana's talk, the idea of translating from another language into your mother tongue, because almost all translators translate from another language into their mother tongue, with a few exceptions, but generally that's the pattern. So I won't take up any more of the time, and I will turn things over first to Tatiana and then to Jana.
Okay, thank you so much, Andrew. Yeah. Well, the scope of my intervention is defined by three key words: as language, life, world, and national sovereignty. I'd like to start with a short theoretical remark. There are two basic approaches to language, or if you want, to ontologies. The one approach considers language as a cultural medium, to speak with Heidegger, as a house of being, and another approach sees language as a tool for communication, tool for propaganda, tool for colonization, or tool to resist colonizations. What is very interesting, it is a relation between these two dimensions of language. And it can be a very interesting theoretical issue, but not only how these two dimensions relate to each other. It can be also challenging practical issue, practical in terms of existential, moral, and political issue as well. It is what I'd like to talk about, to touch upon today, and I will refer to a very particular case, the case of Belarus. And I'd like to give you, first of all, very general, to let you just understand the very general context of the issue. So in Belarus is a European country. It has two state languages, Russian and Belarusian, and this is crucial. Since many years, Belarusian language has been marginalized in Belarus. Also, the country is entitled Belarus. And during the Soviet time, Belarusian language had a very low social status. To make a career, a real professional career in any field, person should speak Russian. So Belarus was very Russo-centric on historical and political reasons. And again, I'd like to stress it is our Soviet legacy. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, we experienced a very short period of national cultural renaissance, revival, but it was really very short. After Lukashenko was elected as the first president of our country, he started developing very systematically the politics of Russification in our country and in different fields. And it was realized, as you understand, and still realized in the interest of Russia. What does it mean? There's a long story of Russification since the launching of the USSR, the Soviet Union. It means that still most of Belarusians speak Russian. So, but what happened? Now I'm coming to the to the point. What happened in 2020 and in 2022? Many Belarusians. So 2020 it was a time of so-called Belarusian Revolution, the amazing mass protest against the authoritarian and today actually neo-totalitarian regimes Lukashenko. So in the context of this Belarusian Revolution, many on this wave, many Belarusians started switched to Belarusian language. And even more Belarusians switched from Russian to Belarusian after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, after 22, because this invasion meant for our country that at the at the state level, Lukashenko's regime acts as a co-aggressor, and Belarus is internationally as a state perceived as a co-aggressor. Of course, the most of people are against this line. So. As I said, many of them switched to Belarusian, and many continue to speak Russian as well, but also started using Belarusian more often in public space. And it is my personal experience as well, and I'd like to share it in several theses, both from phenomenological perspective, as I'm philosopher and phenomenologist, and also from a political perspective. It's really very, it's like a political metanoia, existential change in identity, because just imagine, I was born in the family completely Russian speaking. So, and throughout all my life and all my academic career, developed in a Russian language. So it was really a very impressive experience for me. As for, and now I use both Russian and Belarusian. It depends on the context. For example, in my university, as academicians, I teach in Russian because it is a first language of teaching at my university, but in my position of civic engagement and political engagement as a public intellectual, I speak mostly Belarusian. So, what is very impressive from phenomenological perspective? As a very first step, it was I felt really a certain deficiency. I had this feeling of alienation from this language. Also, I learned Belarusian at school, of course, but nevertheless, I felt this split between myself and this language. But step by step, really, this metanoia happened to you, and it's a really very deep feeling of kind of revelation, because your life world shows itself really in a different register. And what is very remarkable, it's not comparable with the experience when you learned really foreign language. Let's say English or German. In German, in my case, it's really a very different experience, and it's really a kind of wonder, because you experience the reshaping the life world, reshaping the very perception of your life world. It's also about how you reinvent your identity, how do you reinvent yourself. it's about another perception of your life world, as I already said, but also about reconsidering your identity in political terms. And a couple of words about the political perspective to this experience. When I and my colleagues and many other Belarusian activists who are currently in exile, when we use Belarusian language publicly in our communication and also in international communication, we realize that Belarusian it's a very effective tool in order to realize a kind of cultural political demarcation with regard to so-called Ruski Mir, Russian wealth, and to very effective tool in order to defend ourselves, our life world, our national sovereignty against the neo-imperial colonization from the side of Putin and Putin's Russia. So probably I stop here and then we'll can continue to discuss this issue faster. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Tatiana. Can you hear me? Yeah? Okay, great. I'm going to try to be quick because I want to have time for questions too in a discussion. So it's just three things. First, my personal experience around translations. Because as you know, I think I work at the Hannah Arendt Center. I'm the director of programs there. I'm a writer. And so translations is one of the things I do, but it's not only what I do. So then I was like, I don't know if I am the right person to talk about translations, but I just want to quickly give you a couple of examples, what I've been doing and projects I've been working on, and then just some general thoughts on translation, and then I would also love to talk about Hannah Arendt. So I started teaching in North Carolina several years ago. I'm now at Bard. But when I started teaching, a lot of people emailed the department and asked for translations. So that's how I got emails forwarded to me as like the person teaching German in North Carolina. And so then after a while I was like, because I was writing at the time, working on my first novel, and I thought, I guess I could also translate. And so then I was like, okay, I'm just gonna say yes to everything because this is now a thing. I'm also gonna translate. So I had some really interesting requests. You always remember the painful ones. One were bank statements for like a court trial situation where they needed English bank statements translated into German. So I didn't really realize what that meant until I saw the bank statement. And I was like, how am I going to do this? Because you have a word, and then you have like withdrawal, and then you have an amount, and then you have a company name, and then there's like maybe like 5 English words on one statement that you translate, and then you're just like trying to put it all in a Word document. So it was just nuts. So that is quite painful. I was like, okay, I'm never going to do bank statements again. And then Tom, I still remember Tom too, who is like this retired lawyer in Asheville, North Carolina, where I was, and he emailed the department. He's like, I have a book project, and I have this book in Old German, and I need it for my book project, and I'm researching Santa Claus. And I'm like, all right, I'm gonna translate Old German Santa Claus text. And so it was like a 400-page book in Old German, and he just needed it to then have the information to work on his book. So I translated, and no one except for Tom ever saw it. So that's also a little painful. I'm going to talk about exciting projects too, but and it leads me directly to the point that I want to make about translations in general. But maybe another example. Just recently, I had a very exciting project about India for Brand 1 Magazine, a German publication, economy, politics. So I'm still getting emails through the college, through like older connections, and I'm fortunate enough that, or now I must say I'm more picky. Yeah, Santa Claus, check. Bank statements, check. India was exciting, and maybe I can also answer questions then if you have any about other projects. There was one, just to give one more example. So I'm connected with some journalists who always need some work, translation work being done, which is very exciting because translating really is a very close reading in a conversation, a very deep conversation with the text, right? So you're not just reading, you learn so much. So I know a lot about India now, which is really exciting, just because I worked with the journalists on these translations. So there was a website once, a pretty big art fair in London and in Hamburg. They contacted me, and the website was in English and was supposed to be translated into German. And so I made them an offer. I was like, sure, that sounds exciting. I love working with artists, and I've translated many texts for our art websites and museums. And so I made them an offer, and they were like, oh, this is way too high. So we were wondering if we can just put it into Google Translate and then send you the text, and then you just proofread. So maybe that's gonna get some cost. I'm like, nope. Sorry. So that leads me to my actual point, is that unfortunately translators are very underappreciated, vastly under-examined, but at the same time they do such incredible and important work. And I mainly talk about, of course, the people who do it full time and like translate important works. When we think of translations, we usually think of literary translations, but of course we had an interpreter here yesterday. We have legal translations, we have medical translations. All of them keep the world together, do very important cultural work, undermine nationalism. So I just want to point that out, that I'm so grateful that there is one panel. And we've been talking about translation, I think, directly and indirectly in other conversations before, but this is nice to have translation included. And then, just to make my last point, I don't know how we're doing on time. Huh? Yeah, okay, great. I want to talk about Hannah Arendt briefly, just because this is what we think about at the Hannah Arendt Center all the time, her work and translations, and her two languages, or three really. She also spoke French, but German as her mother tongue, and then learning English and translating her own work into English was very important to her and also in her work. So Hannah Arendt, if you're not familiar, born in 1906, passed away in 1975, came to the United States, fled Nazi Germany, came to the States in 1941, and then published her main first work, Origins, in the early 50s. And there's one interview with her and Günter Gauss. You may know it. It's wonderful. If you don't know, it's from 1964. I can highly recommend it. She chain smokes cigarette. I think at some point she smokes 2 cigarettes at the same time, and there's just like smoke coming out of her nostrils and her ears and eyes, and she's answering questions about philosophy and politics. And one question that Günter Gauss asks her is like, so what remains? And she says, what remains is the mother tongue. And I have a couple of quotes and that are really beautiful, like things she said, because it is something that's very important. So she brought German with her to the United States, then learned English in the United States, and immediately pretty much started publishing in English, which is quite impressive, of course. And then just one more thing about Hannah Arendt too. I mean, there's so many texts we could talk about, but her friendship to Randall Jarrell, who was a poet, may know him, translator of German literature, and they met in 1946 when she wrote reviews for the Nation that he was in charge of. And so their friendship really began as an exchange of words and language. He polished her articles, what she called verenglischen, and to make it more English. And so I have a quote about their friendship and the importance of language for her and what that friendship meant to her. So he opened up for me a whole new world of sound and meter, and he taught me to specific gravity of English words, whose specific relative weight, as in all languages, is ultimately determined by poetic usage and standards, Whatever I know of English poetry and perhaps of the genius of the language, I owe to him. And then the one of, since this is a panel on mother tongue, I'm just going to read the one on her as the mother tongue, and then I think we can open it up for questions. I write in English, though I have never lost the distance. There's an enormous difference between mother tongue and all other languages. In my case, I can explain this very clearly. In German, I know quite a great deal of German poems by heart. They're constantly there. She calls it in her Hinterkopf, in her back of the mind. The same can never be achieved for another language. Thus, I take liberties in German that I would never possibly take in English.
Let's thank.
Thank you.
Tatiana.